Chapter 16-20. The sprawling capital of Veldoria Island was a fortress of stone and steel, its buildings rising high against the backdrop of the dense jungle. As Ultima and Rimuru carefully made their way through the busy streets, they kept their faces hidden beneath hooded cloaks. The last thing they wanted was to draw attention to themselves too soon. The nation was more fortified than they had anticipated, but that only added to the thrill of the challenge. Rimuru's eyes darted from one corner of the street to the next, his observation haki sensing the subtle shifts in movement around them. Ultima, for once, wasn't her usual cocky, energetic self. She was fully focused, her playful nature tempered by the seriousness of their infiltration. They had a goal: to gather as much information about the ruling powers on this island before making their move. The city was bustling with life, markets overflowing with vendors selling exotic goods, and soldiers patrolled the streets in pairs, their weapons glinting under the bright sunlight. Ultima glanced at a group of soldiers passing by, her sharp eyes narrowing as she noticed the disciplined way they moved. "These guys aren't pushovers," she muttered under her breath, keeping her voice low so only Rimuru could hear. "Their presence is way too strong for ordinary grunts. They're trained." "Yeah," Rimuru replied quietly. "I can sense it too. Some of them even have haki, though none of them are at an advanced level, from what I can tell. Still, we should be careful. No need to blow our cover before we reach the palace." Ultima sighed, though her fingers twitched as if itching for a fight. "As much as I'd love to knock a few heads together." Rimuru chuckled softly. "Patience. We'll get our chance soon enough." It took them a few hours to navigate the maze-like streets and alleys of the capital. They moved with precision, never staying in one place too long, blending seamlessly with the locals. Rimuru's observation haki guided them, allowing them to avoid any unnecessary encounters with soldiers or curious onlookers. At one point, they paused in front of a grand library that overlooked a plaza. Ultima tilted her head, staring at the towering structure with mild interest. "That place looks like it might hold some valuable information. We could break in, just for fun." Rimuru smiled under his hood. "Later. First, we need to figure out the political structure of this island. The king is our main target, but we need to know who's backing him and how strong his inner circle is." Ultima gave a playful pout but didn't argue. "Fine, lead the way, boss." They continued their search, slowly inching closer to the heart of the city, the royal palace. After hours of silently weaving through the capital, they finally found themselves standing at the edge of the royal district. Massive walls surrounded the palace, which stood tall and imposing in the distance. "That's where he is," Rimuru said, his voice a mere whisper. His eyes flickered as he extended his observation haki, probing the palace grounds. "The king, along with a strong group of guards. They're well trained, but nothing we can't handle." Ultima's grin widened beneath her cloak. "Finally, some fun." "Not yet," Rimuru warned. "We're just here to gather information. We'll make our move when the time is right." Yeah, I get it," Ultima huffed. "But I'm keeping count of how many of these guys I take down later." They slinked through the shadows, moving toward a nearby hill that overlooked the palace. From their vantage point, they could see the entrance to the grand structure, as well as the heavily armed guards stationed around it. "Let's get closer," Rimuru suggested, his voice barely audible as they crept along the outer walls of the palace grounds. They moved with the practiced stealth of predators stalking prey, ensuring they were never seen by the roaming guards. After a few hours of observation, Rimuru and Ultima managed to slip inside the palace grounds under the cover of nightfall. Using Rimuru's haki, they bypassed the guards without raising any alarms. The palace was massive, its towering stone walls adorned with banners displaying the crest of the Veldoria royal family. The throne room, as they discovered, was located in the central part of the palace. They approached with caution, slipping past guards and servants alike. Finally, they stood before the large double doors that led into the throne room itself. Rimuru closed his eyes and extended his observation haki again. "The king is inside, along with about 6 elite guards. They're the real deal. They've got armament and observation haki." Ultima raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's more than I expected. Guess this king isn't as weak as we thought." Rimuru nodded. "We'll need to be careful. It's not just about strength. We don't know what kind of political influence he has or what alliances he's made with other nations. Attacking recklessly could cause problems down the line." Yeah, let's just get this over with so we can smash some heads later," Ultima muttered, though she kept her playful smirk. Peeking through the crack in the door, they caught a glimpse of the king sitting on his throne, a regal figure with an air of authority about him. His 6 guards, clad in dark armor, stood silently at his sides. Each one exuded an aura of power, their haki palpable even from a distance. Interesting, Rimuru whispered. We'll need to take them out fast when the time comes. No playing around. Ultima grinned. I'll take that as a challenge. They watched for a while longer, silently memorizing the layout of the throne room and the movements of the guards. Finally, satisfied with what they had learned, they quietly slipped away, retreating from the palace grounds without leaving a trace. The journey back to their ship was just as silent and uneventful as their infiltration. By the time they reached the docks, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city. The streets were quieter now, with most people either retiring for the night or gathering in taverns to drink away the day's troubles. As they boarded their ship, Ultima stretched her arms over her head, cracking her knuckles with a grin. That was almost too easy. I can't wait to break in and show those guards what real hockey looks like. Rimuru leaned against the railing, gazing out at the city lights flickering in the distance. We'll wait for the perfect moment. Attacking during the night will give us the advantage. Fewer witnesses, fewer distractions. Ultima plopped down onto a nearby crate, folding her arms behind her head. Fine by me, but don't keep me waiting too long. I've got some serious pent-up energy after all that sneaking around. Rimuru chuckled, amused by her eagerness. Patience, Ultima, we'll strike when the time is right. They spent the next few hours on their ship, preparing for the assault. Rimuru laid out a rough plan, detailing how they would approach the palace again under the cover of darkness. Their goal was simple: eliminate the king's elite guards and take control of the throne. Once they had the king in their grasp, the nation would fall under their control. Ultima sharpened her weapons, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. So, once we take out the guards, what's next? Do we leave the king alive or take him out? Rimuru thought for a moment. It depends on how cooperative he is. If he's willing to negotiate, we could use him as a puppet ruler while we control things from the shadows. If not, well, we'll deal with him accordingly. Sounds good to me, Ultima said with a wicked grin. Either way, I'm ready to have some fun. Rimuru nodded, his own excitement starting to build. Just remember, we need to be smart about this. The new world is full of unpredictable powers. If we make too much noise, we could draw attention from bigger threats. Yeah, I got it, Ultima said, though her grin never wavered. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy myself while we're at it. Rimuru smiled. Wouldn't expect anything less. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the ocean, they sat quietly on the deck, waiting for the right moment to strike. The city lay silent beneath them, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon it. With their plan in place and their minds focused, Rimuru and Ultima knew that by the time the sun rose again, Veldanava Island would be theirs. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the capital of Veldanava Island. The city was unusually quiet tonight, its citizens unaware of the chaos about to unfold within the royal palace. The wind howled softly as Rimuru and Ultima prepared themselves aboard their ship. The night had finally come, the night they would take control of the island. Ultima stretched her arms and cracked her knuckles, a feral grin spreading across her face. Finally, we're doing this. I've been itching for a good fight all day. Rimuru, standing beside her on the deck, nodded calmly, though a subtle excitement sparked in his eyes. Don't get too carried away. We're here to send a message, not destroy the entire capital. Ultima snorted, though she understood Rimuru's reasoning. Yeah, I know. Keep the destruction to a minimum. But those guards inside the palace are gonna regret being in our way. They'll be strong, Rimuru reminded her, a hint of caution in his tone. But nothing we can't handle. Just stay focused. With that, the two leapt from their ship and blended into the shadows of the city. The streets were empty, save for a few stray patrols that wandered aimlessly through the darkened alleys. Rimuru's observation haki guided them through the maze of streets, allowing them to avoid any unnecessary confrontations. They moved swiftly and silently, like wraiths in the night. After some time, the towering silhouette of the royal palace came into view. Rimuru halted in the shadows of a nearby building, his eyes scanning the perimeter. The palace was heavily guarded, but most of the soldiers outside were of little concern. The real threat lay within the throne room, the king's elite guards, 6 warriors who possessed haki and were trained to defend the ruler at all costs. We're here, Rimuru said, his voice barely a whisper. Ultima cracked her neck and stretched her arms. About time. Let's make this quick. They slipped through the gates unnoticed, their movements precise and fluid. The palace guards were none the wiser as Rimuru and Ultima navigated the corridors, heading straight for the throne room. Within minutes, they stood just outside the massive double doors leading to their target. Rimuru extended his observation haki, feeling the presence of the king and his 6 guards inside. He turned to Ultima, who was practically vibrating with excitement. There are 6 of them, plus the king. They're ready, but they don't know we're here yet. Ultima grinned, her eyes gleaming. Perfect, let's give them a little surprise. With a swift motion, Rimuru pushed open the doors to the throne room. The sound echoed through the chamber as they stepped inside, their cloaks falling from their shoulders to reveal who they truly were. The king, a tall and regal man adorned in ornate armor, sat on his throne at the far end of the room. His 6 elite guards stood at attention, their hands on their weapons as they immediately recognized the threat before them. The air was thick with tension as Rimuru and Ultima slowly approached the throne, their eyes locked on the king. The king's gaze hardened, but he didn't rise from his seat. Who dares intrude upon my palace? State your business. Rimuru's voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable authority. We're here to take this island under our control. Surrender now, and you might live to see tomorrow. Ultima folded her arms, smirking. Or don't, and we'll make sure you don't see the sunrise. The king's eyes narrowed. You dare challenge me in my own throne room? You may be strong, but my guards will cut you down where you stand. At the king's command, the 6 elite guards sprang into action, their weapons drawn as they charged at Rimuru and Ultima. But neither of them flinched. Instead, they waited until the last possible moment, their bodies fluidly dodging the incoming strikes. Rimuru's movements were calm and deliberate as he sidestepped the first attack. His observation haki allowed him to see every move the guards made before they even committed to it. Meanwhile, Ultima, with her usual fiery energy, danced around the strikes with ease, laughing as she dodged. Is that all you've got? Ultima taunted, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Come on, you call yourselves elites. Rimuru, growing tired of merely dodging, activated his armament haki. His fists darkened, covered in the shimmering black aura that signified his mastery of the technique. Ultima followed suit, her own fists glowing with the advanced version of armament haki, her strength far surpassing that of the guards. With a single swift motion, Rimuru caught the sword of the first guard, his hand stopping the blade with ease. You're not strong enough to face me, he said simply before delivering a devastating blow to the guard's stomach. The force sent the man flying across the room, his body crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. Ultima, on the other hand, wasn't holding back at all. She met the charge of 2 guards head-on, her laughter echoing through the room as she effortlessly dodged their strikes. This is too easy, she shouted before slamming her haki-infused fist into one of the guard's chest. The impact shattered his armor, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The other guard hesitated, but Ultima's eyes gleamed with bloodlust. Oh, don't think you're getting away. She dashed forward, her hand glowing with advanced armament haki as she struck him with a powerful punch to the side. His ribs shattered under the force, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The remaining guards were visibly shaken, but they steeled themselves and pressed the attack. Rimuru, however, had already predicted their movements. He weaved between their strikes with ease, his body moving like water as he countered every attack. Your haki is impressive, one of the guards grunted, his sword flashing as he aimed for Rimuru's neck. But not impressive enough, Rimuru replied, catching the blade in his hand again before delivering a crushing blow to the guard's chest. The man staggered back, gasping for breath before collapsing. Ultima, meanwhile, had finished off the last of the guards, her grin wide and her fists still glowing with power. That was fun, but I expected more. These guys weren't nearly as strong as I hoped. Rimuru glanced at the fallen guards, then turned his attention to the king, who remained seated on his throne, his expression unreadable. You're out of options, Rimuru said, his voice cold. Your guards are down. Now, you have 2 choices. Ultima stepped forward, her grin fading as she spoke. Option 1. You become our puppet, and you get to keep your head. Option 2. Well, she raised her arm, her hand still glowing with haki. You lose it. The king's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between the 2 of them. He could see that his elite guards had been defeated with ease, and the power that radiated from Rimuru and Ultima was undeniable. But even in the face of such overwhelming strength, his pride wouldn't allow him to submit. I will never become a puppet king, the king spat, rising to his feet. I'd rather die with my honor intact than serve under tyrants like you. Ultima's grin returned, a dangerous glint in her eyes. Good choice. Before the king could react, Ultima dashed forward with blinding speed. Her hand, coated in advanced armament Haki, sliced through the air, and in one swift motion, she decapitated the king. His head hit the floor with a dull thud, and his body collapsed onto the throne, blood pooling around it. The throne room fell into an eerie silence as Ultima turned to Rimuru, her grin still in place. Well, that was satisfying. Rimuru nodded, his expression calm. It was the only outcome. Now, we have work to do. With the king dead and his elite guards defeated, Rimuru and Ultima made their way to the balcony overlooking the capital. The city below was still quiet, unaware of the shift in power that had just occurred within the palace walls. Rimuru stepped forward, his voice echoing across the capital as he addressed the citizens. People of Veldoria Island, hear me. Rimuru's voice carried through the night, reaching every corner of the city. Your king is dead, and from this moment forward, this island belongs to us. Ultima joined him on the balcony, her eyes gleaming with excitement. You have two choices. Submit to us and live, or rebel and die. Your lives now belong to Rimuru and Ultima. The streets below buzzed with activity as the citizens began to realize what had happened. Fear spread like wildfire as the people processed the news. Their king, the ruler they had looked up to for so long, was dead, and now two powerful invaders had taken control of their island. Rimuru turned to Ultima, his voice low. We'll have to manage the unrest. Fear is a powerful tool, but we'll need more than that to keep them in line. Ultima grinned. Leave it to me. Fear is my specialty. And so, the era of terror began on Veldoria Island, with Rimuru and Ultima reigning as the new rulers. The citizens, gripped by fear of the powerful duo, quickly fell in line, knowing that rebellion would only lead to death. As the moonlight bathed the city in its cold glow, the shadows of Rimuru and Ultima loomed over the land, their rule marked by both power and fear. 15 years had passed since Rimuru and Ultima seized control of Veldoria Island. The once vibrant and bustling kingdom had changed drastically under their iron-fisted rule. Fear permeated every corner of the land, from the capital city to the outermost villages. The streets were quiet, the people obedient, and the looming threat of rebellion was squashed before it could even take root. Rimuru and Ultima had solidified their positions as the uncontested rulers, and their power only grew stronger with each passing year. They sat atop their thrones in the Grand Palace, ruling with an authority that few dared to question. The throne room was vast and opulent, draped in banners bearing the symbols of Rimuru and Ultima. The atmosphere was cold, and an air of dread hung over the place, much like the rest of the island. On this particular day, the two rulers were discussing the future of their reign. 15 years, Ultima mused, lounging casually on her throne, her legs draped over one armrest. It's hard to believe it's been that long since we took this island. Feels like yesterday we were cutting down those weakling guards and taking over the palace. Rimuru sat beside her, his demeanor calm but radiating authority. Time moves quickly when you're busy consolidating power. We've built something strong here, Ultima. Something that will last. Ultima's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Yeah, we've crushed every rebellion, every uprising. No one dares oppose us anymore. It's been too easy lately, honestly. Rimuru's gaze turned contemplative. It's true. The people are too afraid to rise up against us, and even if they tried, we've trained an army capable of suppressing them. But we need to ensure they remain loyal, and fear alone isn't enough. Ultima sat up slightly, intrigued. What are you thinking? Rimuru leaned forward, his voice steady. We need to keep the military strong. Every soldier under our command must be trained to wield Haki, either armament or observation. We can't afford to have weak links. Ultima grinned, her fingers tracing the armrest of her throne. I like the sound of that. An army of Haki users. No one would dare to even dream of rebellion. Over the years, Rimuru and Ultima had built a formidable military force. The training regimen they imposed was brutal and unrelenting, designed to weed out the weak and elevate the strong. Their soldiers were required to master at least one type of Haki, either armament or observation, in order to serve. Those who couldn't handle the training were either expelled or, more often than not, killed. At the helm of their army was their general, a powerful warrior named Gorik, a towering man with an imposing presence. Gorik had mastered all three types of Haki, armament, observation, and even Conqueror's Haki. Though none of his Haki had reached the advanced stages, his sheer mastery of the three types made him one of the most dangerous men on the island, second only to Rimuru and Ultima. One day, Gorik stood before Rimuru and Ultima in the throne room, reporting on the progress of the military training. Our forces are stronger than ever, my lord, my lady, Gorik said, his voice deep and authoritative. Nearly every soldier now wields at least one type of haki, and morale is high. Those who remain loyal are fiercely dedicated to your rule. Rimuru nodded, satisfied with the report. Good, we need to maintain that strength. The world outside our borders is becoming more dangerous, and we can't afford to be caught off guard. Ultima leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. What about the rebels? Have you crushed any signs of insurrection lately? Gorik's expression darkened slightly. There have been a few incidents. Small groups, nothing that poses a real threat. But they've been dealt with swiftly and efficiently. Rimuru's eyes sharpened. Make sure it stays that way. We've already executed thousands of rebels. If there are any left, we'll kill them all. Ultima chuckled darkly. I'm surprised there are any fools left who still think they can defy us. After everything we've done to them, I thought they'd have learned by now. Gorik bowed his head respectfully. The people are afraid, but fear can sometimes drive desperation. Those who have nothing left to lose are often the most dangerous. Rimuru considered his words for a moment. True, but desperation won't save them. Not against us. The memory of the countless rebellions they had crushed over the years flickered through Rimuru and Ultima's minds. The early years of their reign had been marked by constant uprisings. Villagers, small towns, even minor nobles had attempted to resist their rule. But each rebellion had been met with overwhelming force, and every attempt to overthrow them had been brutally suppressed. The most significant rebellion had occurred 5 years into their reign. A group of former soldiers, disillusioned by the tyranny of Rimuru and Ultima, had gathered an army of thousands. They had believed that their numbers and their courage would be enough to stand against the king and queen. They had been wrong. The battle had taken place in the countryside, far from the capital. Rimuru and Ultima had personally led their forces into the fray, eager to make an example of the rebels. Rimuru had stood at the forefront of their army, his haki radiating powerfully around him. He had activated his advanced observation haki, sensing every move the enemy made before they could even execute it. Ultima had been beside him, her laughter echoing across the battlefield as she tore through the rebel forces with her advanced armament haki. The rebels had fought bravely, but they were no match for the overwhelming strength of Rimuru and Ultima. By the end of the battle, the fields had been littered with bodies, and the ground had been soaked in blood. Rimuru had personally executed the rebel leader, a former general who had once served under the previous king. He had offered the man a choice: submit to their rule or die. The rebel had chosen death, and Rimuru had granted it without hesitation. Ultima leaned back in her throne, a satisfied smirk on her face. I'll never forget the look on that rebel leader's face when he realized we were unstoppable. He really thought he could take us down. Rimuru's expression remained calm, but there was a glint of pride in his eyes. That was the moment the people truly understood who we are. Fear is the only way to control them. Gorik cleared his throat. My lord, my lady, I have ensured that no rebellion will ever gain traction again. The people are too terrified to even speak of resistance. Ultima laughed. Good, keep it that way. If anyone so much as whispers rebellion, you know what to do. Gorik bowed again. Of course, my lady. Rimuru and Ultima's reign was one of absolute authority. They had reshaped the kingdom into a dictatorship, where their word was law and any defiance was met with swift and brutal punishment. The people lived in constant fear, knowing that their lives were at the mercy of the two rulers. As the years went on, Rimuru and Ultima continued to hone their own skills. Both had achieved mastery over all 3 types of haki: armament, observation, and conquerors. But unlike Gorik, they had pushed their haki to the advanced stages. Rimuru's armament haki had reached a point where his strikes could bypass conventional defenses entirely, shattering any opponent's armor and breaking through even the toughest materials. His observation haki allowed him to see into the future with precision, predicting his enemies' movements before they even made them. Ultima, on the other hand, had taken her conqueror's haki to an advanced level, capable of knocking out entire armies with a single wave of her willpower. Her armament haki had become so powerful that her attacks could devastate entire battlefields with a single strike. One afternoon, as they sat in the palace discussing their plans for the future, Ultima leaned over and grinned at Rimuru. You know, we've become pretty damn strong. No one in this kingdom can touch us. Hell, no one in the world could take us on. Rimuru smiled, though his expression was more thoughtful. It's true, we've achieved everything we set out to do. But we can't afford to become complacent. There's always someone stronger out there, waiting for an opportunity. Ultima scoffed. Let them come. I'll crush anyone who tries to take this from us. Over the years, the terror they had instilled in the people grew to an almost unimaginable level. Their army, trained rigorously in the ways of hockey, became the most feared force on the island. Every soldier was expected to show unwavering loyalty, and any sign of hesitation was met with immediate execution. One of their most ruthless practices was the blood trials, a cruel and deadly test that all new recruits had to endure. Those who passed would earn a place in the army, those who failed would never return. The trials were designed by Ultima herself, who took great pleasure in watching the recruits struggle and fight for survival. One day, as Rimuru and Ultima walked through the training grounds, watching their soldiers spar, Gorik approached them. "My lord, my lady," he said, bowing. "The blood trials have been a success. We've weeded out the weak, and the remaining soldiers are stronger than ever." Rimuru nodded in approval. "Good. We need our forces to be ready for anything." Ultima smirked. "I always enjoy watching the blood trials. There's something satisfying about seeing the weak fall." Gorik hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There is one matter that requires your attention. A small group of rebels has been stirring trouble in the northern territories. They're insignificant, but I thought you should know." Rimuru's eyes narrowed. "Deal with them. I don't care how small they are. We can't allow even the slightest hint of rebellion." Ultima grinned, her eyes flashing with malice. "Make an example of them. Kill them all." The rebel group was swiftly crushed, their leaders executed publicly as a warning to others. Rimuru and Ultima made it clear that any act of defiance, no matter how small, would be met with deadly consequences. The message was clear: the reign of Rimuru and Ultima was absolute. The people had no choice but to obey or face certain death. And so, under their iron rule, the era of terror continued. The island of Veldoria had become a kingdom of fear, where the shadow of Rimuru and Ultima loomed over every citizen, and the promise of death was always just a heartbeat away. The sun was setting over Veldoria Island, casting a crimson glow over the island's rugged landscape. In the heart of the imposing royal palace, Rimuru sat on his throne with a look of quiet contemplation, while Ultima paced around, her impatience evident. The room was dimly lit, but the faint glow of their eyes cut through the shadows. "How long until they realize this island is ours?" Ultima muttered, casting a glance toward the windows. "We've wiped out any and all resistance. What more do they expect?" Before Rimuru could answer, the heavy doors to the throne room creaked open. A man in a navy uniform, tall and broad-shouldered, entered. His white marine coat billowed behind him as he approached, flanked by two lesser-ranked officers. His presence immediately commanded attention. He was a vice-admiral. "Rimuru Tempest. Ultima Tempest." The vice-admiral addressed them both, his voice steady but carrying the authority of the world government. "I bring a message from Fleet Admiral Sengoku." Rimuru leaned forward, his interest piqued, while Ultima stopped pacing, folding her arms across her chest. "And what might that be?" she asked with a smirk, clearly unimpressed by the marine's formal demeanor. The vice-admiral's face remained stoic. "As Shichibukai, you are required to aid the world government in the upcoming battle. Portgas D. Ace, a commander of the Whitebeard pirates, is set to be executed. Whitebeard himself may move to rescue him, and the government expects your assistance." Ultima rolled her eyes and scoffed. "So, they expect us to jump when they snap their fingers?" Rimuru stayed silent, weighing the implications of what he had just heard. The mention of Whitebeard stirred something within him, an excitement he couldn't quite suppress. Whitebeard was one of the four emperors, a legendary figure of the sea. The thought of possibly fighting him sent a thrill through Rimuru's veins. The vice-admiral's expression darkened as he continued. "If you refuse, your titles of Shichibukai will be revoked, and you will lose the privileges that come with them." Ultima's grin widened. "Privileges? As if we care about your meaningless titles." Rimuru leaned back in his chair, resting his chin on his hand. "True, we don't need their title. But," he glanced at Ultima, who was already eager for a fight. "Fighting a Yonko, it could be fun." Ultima's eyes lit up with excitement. "You're right, I've been dying for a real challenge, and a Yonko might finally give us that." The vice-admiral frowned. "This is no game. Whitebeard is the strongest man in the world." Rimuru chuckled softly. "We know exactly who Whitebeard is. And that's why we're interested." Ultima stepped closer to the vice-admiral, towering over him. Her grin was predatory. "Tell Sengoku we'll help, but not because we fear losing our Shichibukai titles. We'll help because we want to crush anyone who stands in our way, including Whitebeard." The vice-admiral met her gaze without flinching. "Your motives don't matter. All that matters is that you show up in Marineford when the time comes." We leave at dawn. Later that evening, in their private chambers, Ultima sat by the window, gazing out at the moonlit sea. This is going to be amazing, she murmured, barely able to contain her excitement. Whitebeard, his crew, there's going to be bloodshed like never before. Rimuru, sitting on a nearby chair, was more thoughtful. We'll be walking into a war between the Marines and the Whitebeard pirates. We'll need to be ready for anything. Ultima laughed, her eyes glinting with a dangerous spark. I've been ready for something like this for years. Those rebels we crushed, nothing compared to what's coming. But this is going to be fun. Rimuru smiled, though his thoughts were focused. He knew the scale of the battle ahead. Fun, yes, but also dangerous. Whitebeard is no joke. If we underestimate him, it could cost us. Ultima waved off his concern. We're strong enough, Rimuru. We've crushed everyone who's come our way, and we'll do the same to anyone in Marineford. Hockey or no hockey, devil fruits or not, we'll stand at the top. Rimuru nodded. I'm not worried about us. I just want to make sure we're smart about it. We'll fight, but we'll fight on our terms. Ultima grinned. Smart as always. Fine, we'll crush anyone who gets in our way, but we won't be reckless. The room fell into a comfortable silence as both warriors prepared for the coming storm. The Battle of Marineford was looming, and both of them were eager to see how it would unfold. The next morning, Rimuru and Ultima stood at the docks, their imposing figures casting long shadows as they boarded the marine ship sent to escort them. The Vice Admiral from the day before was waiting, arms crossed. Good to see you're punctual, he said, though there was no warmth in his tone. Rimuru smirked. We wouldn't miss this for the world. Ultima cracked her knuckles, her grin never fading. Get ready, Marineford, the Tempest pirates are coming. As the ship sailed away from Veldanava Island, Rimuru and Ultima stood at the bow, the wind whipping through their hair. Ahead of them was the greatest battle they had ever faced. The chance to fight a Yonko, to make their mark on history. Ultima clenched her fists, her excitement palpable. This is it, Rimuru. This is what we've been waiting for. Rimuru nodded, his eyes focused on the horizon. Let's make it count. And with that, they sailed toward Marineford, where the world would soon witness the might of the Tempest pirates. As their ship sailed into Marineford's harbor, Rimuru stood at the ship's bow, gazing at the fortified marine base with a calm yet intense expression. The towering walls and the bustling activity of the marine soldiers gave a sense of the scale of the battle that was soon to unfold. This is going to be interesting, Rimuru muttered, his lips curling into a slight smirk. Ultima, standing beside him, crossed her arms. Interesting. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I'm looking forward to it. Whitebeard, the so-called strongest man in the world. I wonder how true that really is. Rimuru glanced at her, amused. We'll see soon enough, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We have a meeting to attend first. As they disembarked, the marine soldiers around them gave the duo a wide berth, their fear of the infamous Shichibukai palpable. Even though Rimuru and Ultima were technically allies in this battle, their mere presence was enough to make the lower-ranking soldiers anxious. Always fun to see them tremble, Ultima said, grinning as a few Marines avoided making eye contact. They know what we're capable of, Rimuru replied, his tone casual. They made their way to the meeting hall, where the other Shichibukai had already gathered. The room was filled with an array of powerful and notorious figures. Doflamingo sat back in his chair, his trademark grin stretched across his face, while Mihawk stood by the window, arms crossed, his eyes as sharp as ever. Boa Hancock, ever aloof, sat gracefully in her seat, casting occasional glances at Rimuru. Gecko Moria looked disinterested, his massive form slouched in his chair. Bartholomew Kuma, as stoic as always, stood silently near the back of the room. Well, look who finally decided to show up, Doflamingo's voice broke the silence. The mighty Rimuru and Ultima. What took you so long? Don't tell me you were scared. Ultima rolled her eyes, unimpressed. Scared? Of what? Certainly not of you. Rimuru smirked, glancing at Doflamingo. We're here now. Let's get this over with. Before Doflamingo could respond, Sengoku entered the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. He stood at the front, arms crossed, surveying the gathered Shichibukai with a stern expression. Now that everyone's here, we can begin, Sengoku said. His voice was calm but carried authority. In 3 days' time, we will execute Portgas D. Ace, and we expect Whitebeard to attempt a rescue. Your roles in this battle are critical to the success of the operation. The tension in the room was thick as Sengoku continued to explain the situation. Rimuru leaned back in his chair, his mind already calculating the best way to approach the upcoming battle. Whitebeard, huh, he's a legend, but legends fall just like anyone else, Rimuru whispered to Ultima. She grinned. And we'll be the ones to make him fall. Sengoku's voice pulled their attention back to the meeting. You are all expected to fight on behalf of the world government. Your primary objective is to prevent the Whitebeard pirates from rescuing Ace. Should Whitebeard himself arrive, you are to assist in his neutralization. Mihawk, his voice as cold as his demeanor, spoke up. Whitebeard will come. It's not a matter of if, but when. Sengoku nodded. Indeed, that is why all of you are needed. This is not just about stopping the Whitebeard pirates. This is about sending a message to the world. Ultima raised an eyebrow. And what message would that be? That the age of piracy is coming to an end, Sengoku replied firmly. This war will show the world the true power of the Marines and the world government. Ultima snorted, unimpressed. Sounds like a lot of talk to me. Sengoku narrowed his eyes at her, but before he could respond, Rimuru spoke up. We'll fight, not because of your ideals or your message, but because we're curious to see just how strong Whitebeard really is, Rimuru said, his voice calm but laced with danger. Agreed, Ultima added. This isn't about loyalty, it's about power. Sengoku's expression remained unreadable, but he knew better than to push them. As long as you do your part, that's all that matters. With the meeting concluded, the Shichibukai were dismissed. Rimuru and Ultima left the room, walking through the Marineford halls toward the quarters they had been assigned. In their private room, Ultima threw herself onto the bed, sighing dramatically. So, what's the real plan? We're not just going to fight Whitebeard and walk away, are we? Rimuru stood by the window, gazing out at the horizon. No, of course not. This is a chance to prove our strength. If we take down Whitebeard, we'll claim his title. We'll become the new rulers of the seas. Ultima grinned, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I like the sound of that. Ruling as the new Yonko. It's about time we took things to the next level. Rimuru nodded. The Marines think they're using us, but they have no idea what we're really after. They're just a means to an end, Ultima agreed. So, what's the plan for the actual battle? We wait, Rimuru replied. Whitebeard will come, and when he does, we'll assess the situation. There's no need to rush in. Let him make the first move. Once we see an opening, we strike. Ultima chuckled. Patience, huh, not my strongest suit, but for this, I'll make an exception. The next 3 days passed in a tense anticipation. Rimuru and Ultima spent their time discussing strategies, planning how they would face Whitebeard, and waiting for the inevitable battle. Every moment brought them closer to the clash that would shake the world. Finally, the dawn of the execution day arrived. The atmosphere around Marineford was charged with anticipation. Marines were preparing for the arrival of Whitebeard's fleet, setting up their defense and positioning their forces. Rimuru and Ultima, however, remained calm, seated in the special section reserved for the Shichibukai. Ultima stretched lazily, her eyes scanning the scene below. I can't wait for this to start. Sitting around is getting boring. Rimuru, sitting beside her, leaned forward slightly. It won't be much longer now. Whitebeard's going to make his move soon. And as if on cue, the sound of horns blaring filled the air. A massive tremor shook the sea as Whitebeard's flagship, the Moby Dick, emerged from beneath the water, flanked by a formidable fleet of pirate ships. Ultima's eyes lit up with excitement. There he is. Rimuru's gaze locked onto the imposing figure standing at the bow of the Moby Dick, Edward Newgate, Whitebeard himself. His presence was overwhelming, radiating raw power that even the most hardened warriors could feel. Whitebeard, Rimuru muttered, a smile tugging at his lips. This is going to be fun. Ultima cracked her knuckles. Time to see if the strongest man in the world can live up to his title. As Whitebeard's fleet closed in on Marineford, the tension in the air reached its peak. The Marines scrambled to prepare for the impending clash, while the Shichibukai watched with varying degrees of interest. But for Rimuru and Ultima, this was the moment they had been waiting for. Stay sharp, Rimuru said quietly to Ultima. This is just the beginning. I've been ready for this for a long time, Ultima replied, her grin widening. Let's show them what we can do. And so, as the war for Ace's life and the fate of the world prepared to erupt, Rimuru and Ultima sat calmly in their seats, their eyes fixed on Whitebeard. They were ready to make their move, ready to carve their names into the history of the seas. The battle for Marineford was about to begin, and they were determined to emerge victorious. Let the fun begin, Rimuru whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the sea. To be continued.